Feel free to like scream at me silently if I start to torment your brain. So I'm gonna do plant and animal biology the whole 2 semester in 1 hour. Like, am I crazy? Yes, I am. If you not already know, but this is for you to like get beyond plant and animal world. Like it's nice to have plant and animal, but Ajahn Tamadun might say something else like, but oh, fungi is cool, right? So we're gonna do like a quick tour of everything, like everything that we learn and everything we may have learned and not remember. So gonna kind of bring them back to the surface. And I'm telling you right now, this part of review would not be on the exam. That's one of the most popular questions on earth, right? Would this be on the exam? The answer is no, it would not be on the exam. But I want you to like, because I'm gonna keep, when I'm further in the class, I be giving examples of different group of organisms, and I would expect you to know what I'm talking about. So we're gonna be talking about all the different things. So this is sort of like, okay, you know everything now. You know all these names that we hear before. So here we go. So let's start with the classification, the rank. You guys, we know about this already, that we have the biggest level is the domain, is the most exclusive. Oh, sorry, most inclusive. So I have a lot. So everything is in there, right? So like domain eukarya include everything that's eukaryote. So that's the most inclusive. And you get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller to the species level. So that's the species here is usually the most exclusive. So have a fewest member. So that's the formal, that's a formal designation, and each one of these we call them rank. So the species is the rank within the genus. Genus is the rank within the family. Family is a rank in order. Order in the class, and class in phylum, and phylum in kingdom. So this should be from your biology 1 or 2, but and I'm expecting you to like be able to order them. So this is something that all biologists should be able to do. Like when I say phylum, you should know it's bigger than the class, for example. So that's something all of us biologists graduates should be able to be familiar with, because that's our thing. So that's the rank classification. But at the smallest level, we have the scientific names, which is binomial. So bi mean two, nom mean name. So two names. This two name system I got disconnected, and this will happen more often than I like, because it's about to rain right now where I live. So, and my internet suck. So I'm about to change them, but they turned out okay this morning. So I give them another try. So if I disappear, my apology. I'll try to get back as soon as possible. So don't leave just yet. Just hang out, talk among yourselves. Like, hey, where is Ajahn? And just gossiping me. Just don't do it in the chat, because there will be a record of you doing that in the chat. So you can always like private message each other to badmouth me in the meantime. That's always fun in the class, right? And you can do like properly electronically. All right, so back to scientific names. So it's two name system, right? Binomial system. So we're gonna do this properly and understand which of these names represent. So the first name is the genus name. So it's the name of the genus. So think of it as your last name. So like you're in that same family, everyone has the same last name. So Rosa is all the roses. And Galiga is not the species name. This is the most number one misconception. The second part of the name is not the species name. This is what we call specific epithet. So a specific epithet is the descriptive word for the species. So for example, this is like, my name is Ekapan, right? My last name is Grajak. So everyone in my family is Grajak, but which Grajak are we talking about? Like the one with the gray hair is Ekapan, right? So like you specify the person. For example, so this one is the same. Rosa Gallica, we talk about rose. Which rose? Gallica is come from Gallic, the word Gallic, or Galet, which just means French. So this is a French rose. So this represents the French. So which rose are we talking about? The French rose. So when you talk about the species name, you have to say both. The species name is both, like have to be full name, first and last name. So the genus and the epithet. So if I ask you which is a species name or scientific name of this particular flowers, you have to say Rosa gallica, not gallica. Like Homo sapiens, sapiens is not a species name, Homo sapiens, because otherwise you don't know what sapiens, what Homo you're talking about, or what sapiens, because gallica can mean anything, could be French. So like, what is this French? What French? French flower, French food, French Canadian, French bulldogs, like who knows? Like, so it have to be specific. And these two names are italicized or underline because it's in Latin. It's an unspoken language, and like nobody knows how to speak Latin, well, except for the priests in Vatican. Everyone else, nobody else speak Latin. There are people who still read Latin, and this, I think, if you talk to your grandfather who grew up in Europe, they would tell you that was required in school to take Latin, and they don't speak them anymore. So that's why we choose this language, because it's dead. There's nobody can change them. So so it's in Latin, that's why you have to italicize. But if you look at the third part of the name, so usually there's a third part of the name. The L is the author name. So this is the person who named this. So this is kind of important later on, because we want to know who owned this name, and when we want to change the name, we have to refer to that person. So the scientific name usually consists of the genus name, specific epithet, and the author name to write in full. Most people would leave out the last part, but for us, this is going to become important in like after midterm. So just so we know what, when you see this at L, it's like, who's L? Like there's no guys named L. So there's only L in biology. That L is Linnaeus. I'm gonna badmouth Linnaeus a whole lot more. He's interesting character. So when you say L, like, oh, who's L? Oh, of course the L. You know the L, like the Linnaeus. So, and so that's the author name, and the Gallic loss. So this is a common name. So all the things you just wrote for me in the Excel sheet, those are the common names. So the common names, you guys at MUIC already, you know how even you all speak English, sometimes the same thing mean different in different part of English, in like British English, in American English. And I have the worst experience as a teenager. You know, I went to US as 18, right? And I went to public school in Thailand all my whole life. I never went to international school. And I learned English from like Thai teachers, and I have the Australian guy once teach me for like 30 minutes. That's it. So I have no exposure to like actual English speaker. And I went to the US, and I was asking for my friend for like this, for like erasers. And in Thailand, because we learn British English, this is called rubber. And the people were laughing, and they said, "Can I have a rubber?" They're like, "Oh, what do you want that for?" Like, "Oh, ew!" Like, so rubber in US is condom. So like, oh God, how can something mean so different in two languages? And like, I never use the word rubber anymore, except for talking about para rubbers, which is actual rubber, which is a material for condoms. So that's how it goes. So like, that's why when you study biology, don't rely on common names. Common name led you to weird places. You can talk about the same thing, and when you Google it, it's like, oh, that's not what I meant. You know, I shouldn't Google that. So like, so be careful of common name. We biologists, and we're now taking the systematic class, common name are crazy. And if you're a Thai person, common name are the words, right? Like you can like there's like totally weird common names out there. there's a ton of example out there. So we talk about that. Let's look at the other example. So the second example is the pumpkin, right? Pumpkin is cucurbita. So cucurbita is a genus. This is all the squash or the things that look like pumpkins, like cucumbers, watermelons, and stuff like that. And the second one is the specific epithet, right? Specific epithet mean maximum is like the biggest of the squash, you know, that the fattest one in the family. You know? Oh God, yeah, that fat one. Like, oh, that's the body shaming. Should not do that, right? So that's how you like separate. Like that is how you know it's related to each other. You look at the genus, and Duchner is a French guy who named pumpkins. So the specific epithet can refer to the origin, can refer to the shape, or can be honorific in this case, right? Peperomia ceridoniana. So this is named after the princess, the Thai princess Serinthorn. So you can name it after anything. Basically, this is a genus name, and the epithet can be honorific. And this is Ractanin. This is the species discovered by my colleagues in Khon Kaen University and Kasetsat. And this is given the new name because a new species in Thailand. And this is a fun part about being systematic or taxonomist. You get to name things anything you want, like literally anything you want. There's a mushroom named after SpongeBob. There's named SpongeBob Eyes, SquarePants Eyes. There's bugs named after Donald Trump. There's beetles named after George Bush. There's a fern named after Lady Gaga. So whatever. There's haven't had one that named after K-pop singer. You should start doing that. Yeah, like I know, like Jason Wonky. I don't know what are kids listening to this day. I have no idea. One of those things. So this is a fun part. We're going to see more example of ridiculous name coming up for sure. But in animals, they sometimes have three names. There's a trinomial system. So trinomial system, so for example, there's humans. You might say like, this is not human. This is like application made human. They look too good to be true, but it's a human nonetheless. So our human species are Homo sapiens sapiens. So this is the specific epithet, right? Specific epithet. And the second sapien is the sub-specific epithet, even more specific. So this designate the rank of subspecies. So we not, the sapien means smart. So we the human who is smart, like very smart. Like we try to like reassuring ourselves that we're smart. And the second is, and we have our relatives, right? Like we have a Homo sapiens idaltu, which is Herto man. This is already extinct human species. So, but we related because we different subspecies. But in animal, they usually put that third name into the identify subspecies. Cat also, like Felis silvestris, the relatives is the wild cat, the Silvestris libica. So Silvestris mean cunning. So, you know, if you're a cat person, they're like, they are the worst. They manipulate you. They make you do things that they want. They never give you what you want. They just make you do things. So that's cats. So there's a catus. Catus mean like cute or homey. So that's like domestic cat. And the libica mean from Liberia. So, and the dog is on the opposite, like Canis lupus familiaris. Familiaris come from familia come from family. This is a thing that people like have in the house forever. So like the dogs are like domestic, as opposed to their more formidable looking friends. Canis lupus is wolf. So dogs and wolf, if you let them, if you let your dog roam around, and if they go wild, they might be able to mate with wolf. And actually, there's a case that some wolf mate with domestic dogs and become like half wolf, half dogs. And even the cats, I actually, my friend have the half bobcat, half cat. So it look really like a tiger, but it's the personality is cat, definitely cat. It's like but they're like super beefy, like have this big chest and all that. But so like within the subspecies, the mating is possible. So sometimes you see the trinomial system in animals. Plants, we don't like to use that. We have different uh, conventions. So the reason why we use a common name, I already told you that, because the same common name can mean so many things. So all these three things is called saku, saku, saku in some language or the other. So the first one is called saku palm. And if you are a connoisseur of Thai dessert, you know saku, right? Kind of saku dessert. It's like the little ball that's like starchy balls. Like if you have that in Bangkok most of the time, they made from cassava. But the real saku, the real actual saku, is come from this tree. You have to cut down the tree and use the stuff inside the tree, take them out, and that's become small little balls that you eat. That's actual saku. And you're gonna hear like the real saku, authentic saku, the saku tear from Pathalung this day, and that's saku from the trees, and that's called saku. And in I think in Indonesians or in Malay language they call saku palm, and they're not totally different. This is gymnosperm, have no fruit. And if you're a medicinal plant person, this is also called saku Thai or Thai saku, and it's have no relation with that first saku whatsoever. And this one, the roots are medicinal, used for healing properties. So if you ask for saku for your medicine, you get dessert saku, for example. But if you ask for Maranta or Randicasi, then you get exactly what you want. No. Here's a fun side story. I was once a translator for the international conference in Thailand. And you know, in Thailand we have this food cart, like you know, like food stall that sell like guava, watermelon, and all kind of pretty stuff. And people were totally excited by that. They're like, oh my God, there's a fruit on wheel, you know, like we can buy fruit anytime we want. It's like so cool. And there's this like guava, this bright green guava, you know, like ฝรั่งแช่บ๊วยอะ the green guava. And people were like, what is that? And it's like, it's a guava. Am I froze again? Oops, I did it again. Oh, I'm back. I got frozen for a while. This is what happened when I tell bad jokes. They keep punishing me. So back to Gava story. So that bright green Gava, they were like, what is that? It's like Gava. It's like, it's an English name, right? It's Gava. There's habit in Mexico, and they're like, Gava. And this is people from all over the place. It's from like Europe, South America, North America. They're like, Gava? Like, what's Gava? I was like, wait a minute. Oh, Cedium is like the genus name for the Gava. They're like, oh, Cedium. Like, everyone knows Cedium. Nobody knows Gava. Like, you crazy botanists. Like, so this is how you actually, and we actually have a long discussion of how to pronounce the genus name of Pinus. Pinus, because European insist on saying penis. So, which sound more like penis, but oh God, they're terrible people. So, whatever. The Latin is a funny language. And so basically all the diversity boiled down to three domains of life. We have eukarya, archaea, and bacteria. And these two are formally known as just bacteria, or you call them the prokaryote, right? Because pro mean before, karyote mean nucleus. So this is before they have nucleus, just have no nucleus, just DNA or RNA floating around in the envelope. So this subdivide into archaea and bacteria, and then leave those two microbiologists to tell you how different they are. You might recall gram-positive, gram-negative things, and that's beyond the scope of the class. And you know that's a subtype of bacteria. But the majority of the time we are concerned with the eukarya. So you mean true. So let's have two nucleus. So when you have the envelope nucleus, you are in the eukarya, and almost all the organisms you ever talk about in your life are eukarya, except if you are a microbiologist, you're gonna talk about the others. So domain archaea are usually those extremophile, those extreme stuff. If you've been to US, this is prismatic pool in Yellowstone National Park. So this is a person right here, this one person right there, that small dot right there, there's a person. And this lake, like each area have different type of archaea bacteria that metabolize on really extreme um, environment, and they give different colors. And these are the bacteria that are useful for a lot of things. And they usually are really high heat tolerance, salt tolerant, like really extreme case, like hypothermal vent. So we don't usually think about them, but they are around us, but they're difficult to isolate because they live in such specific area. So they look like that. They look like nothing. They're pretty primitive looking. And the one that be more familiar to us are this domain bacteria. This is sometimes people call this U bacteria. You mean true, like the true bacteria, and you learn there's a coccus shape, bacillus shape, curve form, and all that kind of stuff. And you learn how to separate them using different staining, gram negative, gram positive. And if you're heading into medical technology, you must be able to at least identify them by the morphology, how they look like. The streptobacillus is different from streptococcus, for example. But this day, I mean, to tell you the truth, like most people are just go for the DNA verification already. Think of COVID example. They would not even take the antigen result. They have to have the RT-PCR, which is the genetic testing. So this day, people just go for that. And most of the time, doctor would order the sequencing to make sure that they have the right thing. And in the rest are domain eukarya, which is a pretty big domain. And there's a lot of things in there. So there's 4 main kingdoms. There's kingdom Animalia, so animals, Plantae for plants, and kingdom Fungi for all the fungi, and kingdom Protista. So we're gonna go through like all of them really quickly, just for you to refresh your memories. So kingdom fungi are subdivided into these 5 groups, and they are pretty distinct from each other. And for us, they're all moldy looking things, but they are quite different. For example, the chytrids, the chytridial, this is where they are. So this is like a disease causing fungus in mostly amphibians. So a lot of amphibians have this fungus. And fortunately, this fungus have not made it to the bad kind have not made it to Thailand yet. But all over South America, all the amphibians get infected by some kind of chytrid. So it's a big problems over there. And here we have some chytrids in Thailand too, but not the kind that would harm amphibian quite yet. But this one you be more familiar with. This is Psychomycoda. This is bread mold. And bread mold, like, I don't know if you have done this before, but if you don't do that anymore. Like get a bread, moldy bread, and like, oh my God, I'm so hungry right now. Just like, scrape, and eat them. Like, don't do that, because you might scrape off the mold, but inside, there's already this hyphae of this mold inside all your bread already. The fact that your bread get moldy, meaning that inside of your bread is already gone. It belongs to that fungi already. If you eat that, meaning you like to eat the fungi, which is now your choice. But if you don't do that, then if you see moldy bread, just toss it, They produce spore like that. That's why you have to see the black part of your bread being moldy. And the more beneficial one are Glomeromycoda. This is mycorrhizal fungi. This is a symbiotic fungi that with root. So plants need this because the young plants are really bad at finding their own food. So they use mycorrhiza to find food for them. And mycorrhiza are not actually, it's fun. There's a whole class you can talk about mycorrhiza. Mycorrhiza are not actually that nice sort of person. For every $100, let's say every 100% you make of photosynthesis, you give 60% of your earning to mycorrhiza in exchange to a little bit of nutrient. So basically, this is a really, really bad tax, like super high tax for such a small amount of nutrient, but the plant pay for it. for mycorrhizal fungi. And the more familiar ones are Ascomycota. This is cup fungi. More the common name is cup fungi. This includes most cup, the fungi that produce cup as you see, and this is yeast, almost yeast that used in beer and bread is in Ascomycota. And also this new developed craziness in Thailand, this is Tang Chao Ting, or this is cordyceps. This is actually really nasty fungi. This is a fungi that grow on living insects. So the insect will be alive, and this fungi will grow on them and make insects turn into zombies. So the insects start acting funny because the fungi is getting into their brains. They're like, it's Walking Dead for insects basically. And this tongue shell or the cordyceps is so good for your grandmother, or if you spend enough time at home, you see like 5 million advertisement on cordyceps, and it's like, oh my god. And this come from this type of insects, this type of fungi, and they're not good for your kidney and liver. So don't overdo it. I mean, like I had them, and it's just like you have Red Bull. It makes you feel good for 15 minutes, and then the rest of the time it's just like, what did I just eat? It's not. I think it's overrated. It's probably something in there, but I don't know. If you are a cordyceps salesperson, do not come at me for doing this. And the rest of your typical fungi or Basidiomycota, this is all mushroom, or the mushroom that we eat basically, Basidiomycota. This is a whole phylum of mushroom that belong to the same place. So that's quickly fungi. And Protista is the most sad kingdom, because right now kingdom Protista is like all over the place, and people seem to ignore them. There's so many groups within Protista. They're quite important, but they're not together as a group. They're like all over the place. So for example, we have Rhizopoda, which is amoeba. Somebody just mentioned amoeba. So rhizo mean root, poda mean foot. So they use their foot as a root. So this is the false foot. This is called pseudopodium. So they use this to move around. So they're just like morphing their cells, just unicellular. So most of the Protista are unicellular, just one cell. And this use this to move around. So this is one big group of organism, and I think it's a dying breed. Like people who study Protista are like really difficult to find this day. Like you'll be hard pressed to find like Protist taxonomists. Like they are really difficult people to find. Like you see one, let me know. I think I only know 1 or 2% in my entire life. And the other big group is algae. I put algae in quotation because algae is such a broad group. It's like some are more like plants, some are more like other protists, and some are unicellular, some are multicellular. Such a big broad group, and it's a fascinating group, and it might be our future because they can substitute for food. And we basically, what set them apart, they are photosynthetic and mostly aquatic. I use the word mostly because there are also some terrestrial algae as well. And this is a bit less appreciated. This is Cilio4. So Cilio comes from cilia. So cilia is this. Cilia is a small hair on the cell, right? And phora mean carrier. So those that have cilia, the most famous one are paramecium. So this one actually the sort of detritivore, those that eat detritus within our pond. So they basically our trash takers. So they take all the trash out of our system. They eat everything. Actually, it's a small thing in the water. So that's paramecium. And this is like a group of P complexa. So I almost not going to talk about this, but this is like one of the groups that cause disease. So for example, this one is Plasmodium. This nasty looking one is infected your blood cells, and causing malaria, especially in Southeast Asia. And if you have malaria, you have it for life, meaning it won't go away. So when it infects you, it will go into your blood cell, and your white blood cell is a sort of immune system. It make your immune system weaker. So when you treat them with the medicine, you flush them out from the blood cell, and they go high in your liver. So when you weak again, they cut off your liver and go back to your blood cell. So if you work enough in the forest, you're like, hey, you have malaria yet? Like, yeah. Like, oh yeah. And it's like basically it's like a badge of honor. It's like, yeah, I work in the forest long enough, I have malaria, yeah. And every few years I'll have this crazy fever. And this not the nicest thing, but I don't know, people kind of like to brag about it in a weird way. So at least my colleagues, because I work in the forest a lot. And the last group is slamos. This is like if you go to the forest and you see the rotten logs with like yellow smear on it, those are slamos. And slamos are probably I think number one candidate for horror movies, because each of these cells, this is one cell, but they're unicellular, but they work together like a network. They only come together when they need it, and they can cover everything, and they can move. Like they move like, like a colony, just like all those alien movies you see. That's slamos. They basically get the idea from slamo. They can come apart as a separate cell, come together as a colony, and move around and cover the whole thing. So it's pretty gross, basically. So that's protists. And then the animalia. So all the animals, but most animals that I see on your list are basically just one tiny tip. They're mostly most mammals. It's just all like the thing with big eyes and cute stuff. So there's a lot more animals than just dogs and cats and whales and whatnot, yetis and tigers. So what do we have? So we start from porifera, so sponge. So pori mean pore, so fera mean carrier. So the carrier of the sponge. So those on the left are the fake sponge, not the real sponge. The real sponge is this with the eyes. No, not kidding. So the actual sponge is quite big, and then they a bit more silica. So this actual sponge. So if you go diving in Thailand, like the Southern Sea, there's a lot of like things that look like coral, but they're a bit more round. Those are all sponge. They're mostly yellow in colors, and they have this silica inside the cell to make their shape. So they can get quite big. And the second group is Dinaria. And you might heard of the other name was Silenterata. That's a like OO name. But Dinaria, just like jellyfish here, they all have this thing called nematosis, which is nema mean thread, cis means cell. So this is stinging cells. So that's why when you go to the ocean, like you get stung by jellyfish because they have these stinging cells, and some are more poisonous than the others. Like most jellyfish are pretty harmless, but if you see Portuguese man of war, things like that, it can get hurt pretty bad. And the common wisdom is true: you pee on yourself. Is basically the pee itself is not really magical. What is magical about the pee is the heat from the pee. It's like the temperature make out the poison. But the actual wisdom, not the pee. If you want to go to the place that have a lot of of the jellyfish, bring your house vinegar, some sort of acid, and you just pour it on your wound. It should be fine. It should help lessen the pain. So the pee is like not the ideal, but if you have to, then do it. The other group of Dinaria is corals. Coral, I think, is one of the most amazing thing on Earth. It's like, it's not one thing. It's if you look closely at the coral, this is one coral. This is another coral. And they basically, the actual flesh and blood of coral is this thin layer of flesh, like super thin layer. It's like, basically it's you and your friend holding hands, like we're living together, we love each other. And beneath your hand, it's just a bunch of like calcium carbonate. So basically you love your friend so much, you never let go, and you start like building all this plaque underneath your hands. and you stuck in place together. So one coral is like millions colonies, million corals stuck together by these stones. So when you step on one coral, you basically like you'll be like Godzilla in their world. You're like stepping on their condos, like wow, and you like crashing on them. Not just house, basically their whole city. So think of it next time you go scuba diving. If you step on the corals, you basically destroy the whole district. Like District 13 is gone. Somebody step on me. So that's coral life, and that's why they're so sensitive, because it takes a long time for these people to like come together and build the calcium carbonate, and you just step on them like 1 million at a time. So that's not fun, right? The other group, see, fast forward animal biology in 5 minutes. So the second group is, the third group is Annelida. So Anne mean rings. So this is ringworm. So basically earthworm, and earthworm have no spine. They travel around by like squeezing their body, like they squish and they move, squish and move. It's basically water balloon. Inside is water, you squish them and they go forward, and you squish again and go forward. So squish, 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 and they just move around. And then when it rains, they come up and they dry up and look nasty, pink trail on your sidewalk. Poor thing, they don't know better. So that's Annelida. And mollusca, this is like another, this is my second candidate for evil alien colonizing movie type thing, because it's all over the place. Hydra in Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. use squid or octopus as their symbol, right? Because they can be pretty malicious. They have no spine at all, but they have one of the biggest brain. Look at this. They can go through any tiny space like no business. Like because they have no spines, they just like squeeze themselves in the hydroskeleton. They just make up water, and they just like, but they have such a big brain. They're like, I gotta go through there, but I'm gonna try every possible way to squeeze myself in. Look at that. Oh my God, that looks painful. But they have no pain because they have very little like sensory. They have big brain, but squishy brain. So that's no problem. It's like look bit. See, so I think after the cat, this would take over the world. This is pretty nasty stuff. So that's your mollusca. But mollusca doesn't just have the octopus, they also including all these clams and gastropod, like the one like the nautilus. This also in the mollusca. So mollusca, by having this soft body inside and some hard shell. But for octopus, the hard shell inside. When you eat the squid, you have to take that pin out in the middle. So that's a hard shell. So the squid is basically the clam upside, like inside out. But they put in the same group, which is kind of weird, but they are. And then this one of the most diverse group. People like, there's a lot of people talk about insects. Insects in this group is in arthropoda. Arthro means jointed. Poda means legs. So all the legs of this group are jointed in some way or the others. If you pick up their legs, so like there's more than one segment on their legs. And there's a subgroup in this. So there's millipedes, centipedes, and barnacles, your shrimps, or like things that have all these jointed legs, insects. They're all in this group. And this is one of the most diverse group on Earth. And if you really like for your project, if you're interested in something that have a lot of species, this is what to go to. This like there's like insect, like beetles alone. Beetles have like the book this big just for Thailand. Just so much to look at. If you like hyperdiversity, this is a group to go for. But if you like the weird stuff, this is a group to go for too. This is Echinodermata. Echino means rough. Dermata means skin. This is a rough skin group. If you ever pick up the starfish, they kind of really rough on the outside, and they all like all these have a pretty much the same throughout the group. Sea urchins have spine, and then brittle stars all rough in the outside, and they move around by water. So this is sea star, sea urchin, sea cucumber, sea dollars, all in Echinodermata. They're all marines. And finally, almost all animals you mentioned is chordata. And in chordata, we have mammals. right? We have aves, we have birds, we have reptilia, reptile, we have amphibian, and we have fish. So almost all animal we think about is the one with some sort of backbone, have vertebra, and at some point have notochord, which is bound them together in phylum Chordata. So as I said earlier, I'm not going to ask you to memorize any of this. It's just like review. And last but not least, my favorite, I'm a botanist, so kingdom plantae. So there's plants, there's not just roses and violet, there's a lot more plants. I study mosses personally, so there's a non-vascular plant, so like this are mosses, and they one cell thick, they absorb stuff directly to their body. This is a non-vascular plant, meaning no xylem, no phloem. They just absorb things like a sponge. And I teach the class called Bryology, which is a whole class on bryophyte. So you have to stop me from talking about bryophyte because I can go on forever. I just finished teaching that class and it's take 15 weeks to talk about bryophyte and I can talk more. So don't let me do that. So that's bryophyte. And just how cool they are, you can let them dry for 15 years, right? And you can spray the water. And this from Japanese. Oh. 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 すごいですね。I love Japanese soundtrack. They're the best. So like they can come back to life. They desiccation tolerance, like you can don't water them forever and you put water on them, they come back to life. So that's bryophyte. I have to talk about it. They're cool. The rest of them not so cool. Like the pteridophyte, the fern-like group. So things that look like fern, there's a lycophyte and monilophyte, or I'm misspell this, monilophyte. So this, you will see this term when you read the paper. Sometimes I use the word monilophyte, lycophytes, referring to this fern-like group. So this group start to have a vascular tissue. They have xylem already. They have xylem, but still no seed. So they have vascular tissue now. They can transport water up the stem. That's why they get bigger, but there's still no seed. They produce spores. And you can see that the vascular system inside the body, you can cut them up and you see this vascular system inside. And using tracheids as their water system. So if these are not familiar, you're going to talk about this in plant biology anyhow. And they produce this weird structure at the end. The fern always have this like curling signature, and there's lycophyte have this reproductive structure at the end, and they produce spores. So this group, instead of produce seed or fruit, they produce spores. So they're spore producing. And they're producing the spore right on their leaf. And the gymnosperm, so gymno means naked, sperm means seed. So this is no coincidence. You're like, what is sperm? Like, ew, sperm, talk about sperm, right? Sperm means seed. And if you read the old literature, when they talk about people having sex, they're like, oh, he put the seed in her womb. Like basically he put the sperm in her womb. So the seed and sperm actually have the same, it's the same word back in the day. So become different in English these days, but it's the same thing. So the sperm means seed. So the gymnosperm are naked seed, a seed without fruit. So this is a seed that developed without the fruit covering them. And this is including conifer, cycad, and ginkgo. And this is not very typical in Thailand, but it's a lot more typical in the temperate zone. And finally, we have angiosperm. So the word sperm again means seed. Angio doesn't mean flowers. Angio means container. Meaning the seed is inside the container. The seed, the dispersal unit is inside some container, and that container, we call them fruit. So those flowers, when then fertilized, they produce fruit that protect the seed. So all the angiosperms have in common is the protected seed. So, and this require the pollinators to help them spread the pollen. And then if you need a reminder, all this fruit come from the flower. So this is a pea flower. Look at what happened after the flower have sex. Look at this. So this is your peas. Like, so basically, when you eat plants, you think you save the world, you're vegan, you're mercy kind. You actually eat plants, baby. Like you take away from their mother and father, like they just give birth, and you're like, oh, that looks yummy, and you eat the baby. So next time you have a fruit, you eat the babies. Okay, that's my final message for this class. You eat the babies, but well, that's part of the survival, because they want you to eat the baby, because you can be the disperser. You can disperse the seed to somewhere new, right? This time it's durian season. Durian without us would not spread this far out in Southeast Asia. And why in Southeast Asia you should be proud of. But I hate durians. I absolutely. If you want to give me gifts, durian is the worst idea. I would throw it back at you with the full spy on. So don't do that. So that's a quick review of diversity. Oh my God, I just did that in an hour.